Hello, curious minds, and welcome to this intellectual journey. Imagine for a moment a world where half the population is considered by nature and divine design incapable of deep reasoning. A world where their sole purpose is to please and serve. That was the world of the 18th century. But in the midst of that suffocating atmosphere, a voice emerged that didn't just ask for mercy or kindness, but demanded justice with the force of an intellectual hurricane. That voice belonged to Mary Wollstonecraft. Often called the mother of modern feminism, Wollstonecraft was much more than a label. She was a philosopher who dared to debate the giants of her time, dismantling arguments that had remained unquestioned for centuries. Today we are going to deconstruct her masterpiece, A Vindication of the Rights of Woman. We won't just look at her political arguments, but her devastating critique of an educational system designed to keep women in a state of eternal mental childhood. How is it possible that a self-taught woman, born into economic instability, came to shake the foundations of European political philosophy? The answer lies in her unwavering faith in an essential human faculty: reason. Before we begin, a brief note. To bring this narration to life, I have used artificial intelligence tools to generate the images you see. Think of them as a canvas, a way to illustrate the ideas and the atmosphere of the story we're telling. They won't always be a literal representation, but rather a visual accompaniment to let your imagination take flight with me. I truly hope you enjoy it. To understand the magnitude of Wollstonecraft's thought, we must first place ourselves in her context. We are in the 18th century, the Age of Enlightenment. The Enlightenment promised to liberate human beings through knowledge and science. However, this light had a massive blind spot. While philosophers like Voltaire or Rousseau spoke of liberty and the rights of man, women were systematically relegated to the domestic shadows, excluded from full citizenship. The prevailing view was that woman was, by nature, a creature of sentiment and not of reason. It was believed that her biology made her unstable, fragile, and destined solely for motherhood and caring for her husband. It was a biological cage. Mary was born in 1759 into a family in social decline. Her father, a despotic man and a poor manager, squandered the family fortune and subjected her mother to constant abuse. Mary learned about tyranny early on. This domestic experience was not trivial. Wollstonecraft observed how the lack of economic and legal independence turned women into de facto slaves to their husbands or fathers, no matter how irrational or cruel those men might be. Determined not to follow that path, Mary sought her independence. She worked as a lady's companion and a governess, jobs that allowed her to see firsthand how the education of wealthy girls turned them into superficial and vain beings. But the true turning point in her life came when she moved to Newington Green and met the rational dissenters. This group of radical intellectuals believed in progress, social justice, and the power of reason to reform society. It was here that Mary understood that her dissatisfaction was not just personal, but political. She began to write, not as a hobby, but as a profession. She became one of the first women in Europe to live by her pen. Her entry into the public arena was explosive. When Edmund Burke criticized the French Revolution, Mary responded immediately with A Vindication of the Rights of Men, attacking the defense of tradition and aristocratic privilege. But her crowning work would arrive 2 years later, in 1792. A Vindication of the Rights of Woman was not just a book, it was a battle cry against centuries of philosophical and educational misogyny. Wollstonecraft's central argument is deceptively simple, yet radical. She maintains that women are rational human beings, and if reason is what distinguishes us from animals and brings us closer to God, then men and women are equal in essence. This is where Mary introduces her sharpest critique. She admits that women of her time seemed intellectually inferior, preoccupied only with fashion, gossip, and romance. But, and this is the big but, she asks why. Her answer is the environment. Wollstonecraft argues that the supposed female inferiority is not natural, but artificial. It is the product of a deficient education and a socialization that deliberately stunts their mental capacities. She uses a powerful metaphor. She compares women to flowers planted in soil that is too rich, which grow fast and beautiful to the eye, but whose roots are weak and die at the first strong wind. They are decorative, not functional. Wollstonecraft directs her artillery against Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Rousseau, in his work Emile, had proposed that a woman's education should be the opposite of a man's. The man should be strong and rational, the woman weak and passive. For Rousseau, woman was made to please man. Her education should focus on obedience and cultivating physical charms. Wollstonecraft attacks this idea with fury, calling it absurd and degrading to humanity. She writes, to paraphrase the idea, that teaching a woman to be weak and cunning to manipulate men is to turn her into a morally inferior being. True virtue, Mary insists, can only be born from knowledge and independence. A key concept emerges here: rational virtue. For Wollstonecraft, there can be no morality without reason. If women are denied the development of their reason, they cannot be truly virtuous, only obedient or hypocritical. Mary also criticizes the obsession with beauty and romantic love. She argues that women are taught from childhood that their greatest achievement is to inspire love, which makes them slaves to the opinions of others and the passage of time. It's a cruel trap. Society values a woman for her youthful beauty, but that beauty is fleeting. When it fades, the woman who has not cultivated her mind is left with nothing, turned into a discarded object or a bitter mother. Wollstonecraft is not against marriage or motherhood. In fact, she argues that an educated woman will be a better wife and mother. Not a blind servant, but a rational companion and a competent educator for her children. She proposes a revolution in national education. She advocates for a system of coeducation where boys and girls study the same subjects together. This was unthinkable in her time, a heresy against established customs. Her logic is impeccable. If men and women are to live together in society, they must be educated together to understand each other as equals. Separation only fosters mystery, distrust, and mutual sexual objectification. Wollstonecraft also touches on the subject of economic independence. She argues that women must have access to professions beyond needlework or basic teaching. They should be able to be doctors, shopkeepers, or run their own businesses. Economic dependence is, for her, the root of moral corruption. A woman who must sell herself in marriage for sustenance is not much different, in ethical terms, from a prostitute. This was an incredibly harsh statement for Georgian society, but let's return to the concept of sensibility. The 18th century adored excessive sensibility, fainting spells, tears, and emotions worn on one's sleeve. Mary despised this. She saw it as a cultivated weakness that prevented clear thinking. She called on women to toughen their bodies and their minds. Physical exercise, the outdoors, rigorous study. She wanted robust citizens, not porcelain dolls who fear a storm or an intellectual debate. It is fascinating to note that Mary does not write to please. Her tone in the Vindication is often severe with women themselves. She scolds them for their complicity in their own oppression, for accepting being treated as pets. This severity is born out of respect. She believes so much in the potential of women that it infuriates her to see that potential wasted on frivolities. It is the love of a demanding teacher who knows their student can do more. Wollstonecraft also connects women's rights with the struggle against the aristocracy and the monarchy. She sees all arbitrary hierarchies as interconnected. The king over the subject, the master over the slave, the man over the woman. Her vision is holistic. You cannot have a truly democratic or republican society if half of the citizens are domestic serfs. Liberty must be universal, or it is not liberty, it is privilege. Despite the power of her arguments, Mary's personal life was turbulent and often used to discredit her work. She traveled to Paris during the terror of the Revolution, seeking to see the change up close. There she fell in love with Gilbert Imlay, an American adventurer. She had a daughter with him outside of marriage, Fanny. Imlay abandoned her, which led Mary to 2 attempts on her own existence. The champion of reason was struck down by overwhelming emotion. Her critics seized on this. How could the woman who preached the mastery of reason over passion fall so low for love? But this contradiction only makes her more human and her philosophy more urgent. Mary survived and returned to London. There she met William Godwin, an anarchist philosopher who respected her intellect. It was a union of equal minds. They married, even though both criticized the institution of marriage. From this union, her second daughter, Mary, was born. But tragedy struck again. A few days after giving birth, Mary Wollstonecraft died of childbed fever. She was only 38 years old. A bright light was extinguished far too soon. What happened next is crucial to her legacy. Godwin, in his grief, published a memoir about her, revealing her personal affairs, her attempts at personal cessation, and her struggles. His intention was honest, but the effect was devastating. Conservative society was scandalized. Mary was branded a prostitute, a hyena in petticoats. For nearly a century, her name was synonymous with scandal, and her philosophical work was buried under the weight of her biography. It wasn't until the rise of the suffrage movement in the late 19th and early 20th centuries that Wollstonecraft was rediscovered. Feminists saw in her a pioneer who had articulated their demands 100 years earlier. Today, her analysis of the social construction of gender remains incredibly relevant. When we talk about gendered toys for boys and girls, or the gap in scientific careers, we are discussing Mary's themes. Her insistence that the mind has no biological distinction is the cornerstone of modern equality. It reminds us that limiting the intellectual development of any human being based on their biology is a wrong against all of humanity. Wollstonecraft challenges us to examine our own cages. What limiting beliefs do we accept as natural? How does our culture educate us to be less than what we could be? Her voice resonates through the centuries. It is ironic and poetic that her daughter, Mary Shelley, wrote Frankenstein. While the mother analyzed how society creates monsters by denying education, the daughter wrote about a monster created by scientific ambition without ethics. Both explored the limits of the human and the social, but Wollstonecraft focused on the monster of ignorance and dependence. Her Vindication is a manual for dismantling that monster, brick by brick, argument by argument. If we read Mary today, we are struck by her modernity. She doesn't ask for special treatment. She asks that women be treated as responsible adult beings before the law and before God. She asks for an end to perpetual infantilization. One of her most beautiful passages speaks of friendship. She says that the happiest marriage is one where passion is transformed into friendship, because friendship occurs between equals, while romantic passion often involves domination. This idea of civic friendship is vital. For Wollstonecraft, a healthy republic is based on citizens who can be friends, who respect each other mutually. Misogyny prevents this friendship, fracturing society at its core. In the end, Mary Wollstonecraft's legacy is one of intellectual bravery. She dared to think for herself in a world that told her she couldn't think. She dared to write when she was told to be silent, and she paid the price. But because of that price, she opened a door that could never again be fully closed. She left us the conceptual tools to fight for an education that makes us free, not docile. An education for virtue, not for ornament. I want you to take away this idea. Education is not just about learning facts. It is the construction of the soul. If we design an education to create inferior beings, we are mutilating the human spirit. Mary saw this with crystal clarity. Her critique of traditional education remains valid. How often do we educate to fulfill pre-assigned roles instead of developing critical thinking? The vindication is an uncomfortable mirror for any educational system. Mary invites us to a revolution of the mind. She asks us not to accept authority just because it is old or traditional. She demands that we pass everything through the sieve of reason, even our own most deeply rooted prejudices. Imagine how difficult it was to write those words in 1792. No vote, no property, no rights over her children. And yet she spoke with the authority of a universal legislator. That is power. Her life teaches us that ideas have consequences. Her books didn't just stay on the shelf. They changed how women saw themselves. They planted the seed that biology is not destiny. We often forget that the rights we take for granted today were first imagined by people like her, who were ridiculed in their time. Mary Wollstonecraft was a visionary in the most literal sense of the word. She saw a world that did not exist and had the courage to describe it. A world where her daughter could be a writer, where women could vote, where the intellect would have no gender. We live in the world she dreamed of. But the task is not finished. As long as invisible barriers, glass ceilings, and educational prejudices still exist, a vindication of the rights of woman will remain mandatory and urgent reading. So the next time you hear someone say that something is natural or that it has always been this way, remember Mary. Remember her skepticism, her sharp pen, and her non-negotiable demand for rational respect. Mary Wollstonecraft was not perfect. She was passionate, contradictory, and sometimes reckless. But she was free. And she dedicated her life to trying to ensure that other women could also taste that intoxicating freedom of the mind. Her story is a reminder that philosophy is not an abstract game for men in ivory towers. It is a tool for survival. It is the hammer with which we break the chains of oppressive tradition. Reading her today, we feel the electricity of her indignation. It is not a cold text. It is a text that burns. It burns with the frustration of seeing talent wasted and lives artificially limited. Wollstonecraft bequeathed us the idea that female weakness is a social construction. If you stop binding a girl's feet, she can run. If you stop binding her mind, she can fly. It is that simple and that revolutionary. I hope this journey through Mary Wollstonecraft's thought has ignited a spark in you. May it inspire you to question the education you received and to always seek the autonomy of your own reason. Don't let anyone tell you what your place is. Your place is wherever your reason and your virtue decide to take you. That is the final lesson of the hyena in petticoats, the great philosopher who refused to be a decorative flower. Let's reflect for a moment on the cost of truth. Mary lost her reputation for telling the truth. How many of us would be willing to sacrifice our social image to defend what we believe is just? Her work also teaches us about the loneliness of the thinker. Often seeing beyond your time means walking alone. But that loneliness is the price of originality and moral progress. Mary did not live to see women's suffrage or universities open to women, but every woman who enters a library or a laboratory today walks on the foundations she helped lay with her suffering and her genius. She transformed personal pain into political argument. Her abusive father, her unfaithful lovers, all of that was fuel for her theory that women need power, not over men, but over themselves. Power over themselves. That is the key. True emancipation is not dominating the other. It is self-government. It is the ability to direct your own life under the dictates of your own rational conscience. In a world that bombards us with unreachable beauty ideals and prefabricated roles, Mary's voice is an anchor. She brings us back to the essentials. Cultivate your mind. Strengthen your body. Be useful to society. Wollstonecraft's critique of coquetry is brutal. She sees it as a deformation of character. Instead of being honest, women learn to feign to obtain protection. She wants dignity, not protection. Dignity, that is the word that resonates. Woman doesn't need to be saved. She needs people to stop tripping her up. She needs the space to fall and get up by herself, to learn from her mistakes like any man. As we close this analysis, let's think of Mary Wollstonecraft not as a museum figure, but as a living interlocutor. If she were here today, what would she criticize about our world? What new invisible chains would she point out? Perhaps she would point out the tyranny of social media, or the aesthetic pressure that still stifles many. Her analytical mind would not rest. And that is the invitation. Not to rest, to keep analyzing and improving our reality. Mary Wollstonecraft was a light in a dark age, a light that flickered brightly, that was nearly extinguished by scandal, but that today shines stronger than ever in the pantheon of world philosophy. Thank you for joining me in this deep dive. It has been an honor to bring back the voice of this giant. The history of ideas is fascinating because it shows us that progress is never an accident. It is a struggle. If this video has made you think, if it has challenged you, then we have fulfilled our goal. Philosophy must be uncomfortable in order to heal. Mary Wollstonecraft made us uncomfortable to make us better. If you value this kind of rigorous and narrative content, I invite you to subscribe and share this video. Help us bring philosophy to more curious minds. Leave a comment. What do you think of Mary's vision of education? I am your host on this journey through knowledge. See you in the next analysis, where we will continue to unearth the great ideas that have shaped our humanity. Until next time, keep questioning everything.